Thank you very much. Yeah, it's an epic. So stay tuned. There's a link to the merger information both on the Internet 2 homepage and the NLR homepage. If you want to get in and study the play-by-play and all the statistics and the cast of characters and so on, it's all there. But bottom line for us is that we're continuing to forge ahead with this initiative. And in that spirit, a number of us got together in Kansas City to talk about the initiative, particularly since when we started this and when we structured it, we had about 5 or 6 states, and now we have 38. In the meeting that we had in DC, we probably had 75 or 80 people there. These off DC meetings tend to be a little more lightly attended. Often people are in the thick of fall semester, and also travel budgets seem to have once again diminished pretty significantly. So there are a number of our members who will only choose to come to one meeting, one Internet 2 meeting a year, and so it looks like the DC one wins. So let me talk to you a little bit about what we concluded in our meeting, and get some feedback from all of you. We did talk about structure a bit, and the notion was that, is there a way that we could be sort of more nimble and efficient without succumbing to increased formality in terms of procedures and structures and so on? I think we've tried, except for getting stuck in rooms like this, we've tried to aim for a level of collegiality and informality in all of our proceedings. There's no Robert's Rules of Order. There's no any of that kind of stuff. But I think there was unanimity about wanting to continue with that same approach and that same sort of tone. There was a sense, though, we talked a lot about these meetings and how there are kind of two things that go on at the meetings. There are a lot of presentations that are useful to all of us to know about what's going on at NOAA and what's going on at NASA, what Janet's doing, the presidential libraries. Really, really rich content. But we also concluded that there were other people at the Internet 2 meetings who would be interested in that, who might be from the research universities. They might even be some of the other researchers who are here from government research and so on, and that we probably should structure the day in such a way that a portion of it is presentations, and that we let people know that they're going on, what kinds of presentations there'll be. In DC, very often we'll have many of the federal funders come in and talk about their priorities for the coming year and the kinds of programs that might be of interest or might impact our communities. But we open that up to a broader audience. And then we have another half of the meeting that's sort of the business of the K20 initiative, at which point we have a closed meeting that was made up of the advisory council that we currently have. Although it's actually not a, it is an advisory. We're calling it an advisory committee. We have to. Internet 2 is fussy about some of the terminology, so we'll have to work with them so that we don't cause any confusion in the kinds of terminology we use. But we wanted to keep this very large group that we have, that has representatives from every state, that has representatives from libraries, from science centers, from museums, from governmental agencies like NOAA, NASA, and so on, because we thought that the sort of range, the heterogeneity, the diversity of perspectives was really one of the most valuable So we wanted to make sure that we did continue in the same vein that we started. But we also wanted to have a slightly more nimble group, an executive council of folks who would meet more frequently on the phone, maybe once a month, more often if necessary, that could attend to logistics, agenda, vision and goals, those kinds of things, and make sure that we're on track. And we came up with the usual sort of simple structure: a chair, a co-chair, a secretary, what we call the funding liaison treasurer. I mean, it's not as though we have a vast budget, but knowing about funding agencies is important to all of us, and that person could maybe have a specialty in that. And then James and I as the staff to the initiative. And then once we had a chair, then we'd have a past chair to the structure. At the meeting, because there were people, again, we didn't have a very formal process around this. We had a few volunteers who stepped forward to help out with the first round of this, and Randy is offered to be the first chair, Jennifer the co-chair. See, Jim, did you end up being secretary? Yes. And Dan, the funding liaison treasurer. If there's huge contention about this, or if many of you feel, we certainly could step back and put it to a vote. It was our assumption that if there was a live body there that wanted to volunteer for this and they were enthusiastic, it was great. That was a fine way to start, and we'll continue to cycle folks through. I can't remember what we decided about terms. Was it 2 years?
I think yeah, full-year term and then a year passing.
Yeah. Right, so 1 year term with the past chair serving 2 years. Okay, I couldn't quite remember. There was also some interest in having, on occasion, these sort of interstitial meetings between the Internet 2 fall member meetings, where we may want to get together someplace, just us, for some particular purpose. It doesn't have to be this sort of, it doesn't have to be to think about the structure of the initiative. It can actually be to come together and talk about a particular project or projects or some other aspect of the initiative. So that, I want to stop there on the structure stuff and see if anybody who's there in Kansas City wants to add anything to that, or if any of you have comments about that, or if you think that the direction that we took is okay, or needs some modifying in some particular way.
Maybe we're mentioning that we had maybe we're mentioning that we also, as part of the structure discussion that we talked about, pulling together working groups or standing committees as a part of the, we may have been headed that direction. James has a diagram that he's created here to kind of give us a visual of what we had in mind, but the working groups are intended to help because as you can see, there's so much rich content, there's so many projects going on, there's so much really fertile territory where our work intersects with our colleagues and also within Internet 2, that we can leverage value from other initiatives as well as contribute value to other initiatives through an ongoing kind of process where we can make that activity more transparent throughout our committee. So the K-20 Advisory Council as a whole group has some areas where we really would like to enlist and support the work of members in areas like web presence, support for the process that goes along with the connectivity survey, and there are 3 or 4 others. I think we talked about it in the web presence, connectivity survey, outreach and partnerships, and funding projects. So what we hope to do is call upon the committee of the whole and form some working groups that will support the work of this advisory council in between sessions. And so one place where I think it's going to be helpful for us to start is, and we talked about doing this prior to the meeting, but we had so many things going on with this meeting, but doing a survey and gaining as much input and information from the entire advisory initiative, the K-20 initiative, about their participation in working groups and about the particular projects of interest as a way of helping to form some of those working groups. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Randy. The one other thing that I was going to add was that the actual meetings would be then led by the chair of the executive council, and James and I would sit silently but helpfully, and so that'll be cool. What? Yeah, that kind of dessert drink or something. Anyway, so that's kind of where we got to. It seems like it's sort of the right moment to there are enough things going on. There are enough very strong participants from different kinds of institutions and across the U.S. and now with more international colleagues that this was a sort of opportune time to make some of these changes. One of the other things that came up, and this is just a matter for discussion since we're talking about this, and we concluded not to conclude anything on this topic, but to have a conversation with you, is where do our corporate and vendor folks fit into the structure, and how do we engage them? From time to time, we've had some folks show up at the meeting, and sometimes it wasn't, some people felt it wasn't appropriate, and so I'd like to hear from all of you about how you think, because there are a number of, Internet 2 has many corporate members, and we haven't had sort of an official, outside of the Internet 2's corporate members, we haven't had a separate sort of K-20 corporate membership, and I suspect we wouldn't, but there are something like a couple hundred corporate members, if I'm not mistaken, of Internet 2. So, any thoughts from folks in the room about do you involve them, do you not involve them, do you involve them in certain things? What's your pleasure?
Hopefully the point of exclusion level.
Are you asking me for?
I'm asking, is there a reason to exclude them? If there's no reason to exclude them, would we include them?
Yeah.
I think the discussion up to this point was the reason they've been excluded is because we didn't want this to turn into a sales platform, or if there was any kind of discussion, for example, about products or things that might be non-disclosure, or somebody testing something that wasn't supposed to necessarily get out to competitors, that they didn't want those type of things disclosed. I think for those of us who are in the camp of, well, let's bring them in, the issue is one very solidly of they can be partners because they need to be able to know what we're thinking and what we're feeling and what we're using, so that they can develop these tools and products that we're going to use for what we want. If we don't actually talk to them, it's up to them to get that information from somewhere else, and it might not be the tool or the product that we want. On the other hand, we don't want to turn it into a sales platform where they're constantly bringing whatever they feel we want in front of us on a regular basis. So some of that would be, especially if they were going to speak or present or be one of these type of things, that they were sponsored or somebody else was kind of bringing them along and saying, hey, this is something we're doing in conjunction with them and it's a real project, therefore they can present it to the group. So I think, does that pretty much sum up what we've talked about, I think?
But there would be no reason not to set those as ground rules.
Right, that was sort of what we were thinking as we set those as ground rules. There's one particular person who's been very helpful, and she wants to come, and she asks on a regular basis. She was part of the program committee for this conference, yet we still don't allow her to come into these meetings. But then there are other folks that potentially could come along that we're not so sure we want around because we've been involved with them in the past and we just don't want to go down that road again. And you can't really make that decision based on individuals. Well, I think that's why it is the way it is.
Yeah, I think part of the discussion we had at the last meeting was that excluding them for the reasons that Dan just iterated there does not mean we can't invite them ad hoc in sessions like this for the purposes of development. To the extent that this is a K-20 advisory committee, which is the K-20 community, perhaps the vendor is more appropriate as making decisions, voting to the extent that we vote versus the Robert's rules.
I can give an example. The group in the UK, the National Education Network Content Group, have a standing committee of educational members, and then a list of guests from a lot of the manufacturers or other people who might be interested, who are invited when appropriate. Don't assume to get an invitation every time. And then they can kind of make it as they go along as well as the guests.
I think we even talked about having different portions of our meeting, for example, having half of the meeting where anybody would be invited and the other half where it was a little more closed. But, I think we went through a bunch of different scenarios that way as well. I just can't think of any content right now that would be anything we'd need to exclude anybody from. The problem is once you think of the application or the content or the thing, then it's hard to go back and do that.
Yeah, I thought there was a sense that the open part of the K-20 meeting would be open to anybody who's at the Internet 2 meeting. Whoever could be here, corporate or education, would be welcome to come and listen to the presentations. Where it was less clear is when we had what we were calling the business part of the meeting, where there were people who had either been appointed by their sponsoring organization in their state, or who we had invited collectively to come join us, whether that was the library, museum, the international contingents, and so on. One way is to also think about having a representative group from corporate members, to have 2 or 3 people join that group and have them rotate on and off as appropriate. And that's another way to do that. Because we haven't said to anybody, that's one idea, way of doing that. So what should we do for the spring meeting?
Get a bigger room.
I'm not sure that there are bigger rooms.
I know.
I always view vendor community as a partner, and I think it's good for them to see what content is being developed by basically people And I just don't think there's an issue. We haven't had a discussion or had any issues that I can think of in a couple of years where anyone can sit here. And you control the agenda about who presents and what's presented. We'll let James control that. I mean, you really can control that, but I don't know what differentiates the presentations we saw today from any kind of product being developed, other than what we were doing here is presented by not-for-profits. So,
Yeah, to speak for Andrea, who is here today, I think that she was the one, I shouldn't say that, I agree with her, but she was a little more strong advocating than I am. That in many ways, what it might do is make you less likely to be open about activities that your organizations are engaged in the presence of vendors. So that to the extent that you're going to invite a visit from an insurance salesman, you don't want to advertise the fact that you're considering shopping for life insurance because you're going to give them a call. Likewise, to the extent that you're discussing a program, somebody may say, hey, I have perfect technology for that, and they're going to hammer on it. So I think that the notion was is that you didn't want to quash the conversation among the educational organizations here who speak freely with regard to the programs that they are doing, might get killed, are in danger of being funded, whatever. Understanding that if you're in this group of people who have no vendor axe to grind, those comments can be made freely, and you don't have to worry about them being put to use that you might find distasteful way.